To start the month off just right, on February 2nd, a tired old groundhog yawns, stretches his short little arms, and slowly makes his way out of the cozy dark hole in which he lives. Cautiously, he pops his small head and plump body out into the cold winter air, of course not really wanting to, but he must, for it's Groundhog Day, and millions of people, like you and I, are anxiously waiting to find out what will happen next. If Mr. Groundhog doesn't cast a shadow, then it means a lovely spring will come early. But if he sees his shadow bright, then winter is predicted to last another 6 weeks. Gray old groundhog, today is Candlemas. Now, old groundhog, consult your weather glass. If the day is fair and light, so you see your shadow bright, say, old groundhog, will winter ever pass? Gray old woodchuck, the day is bright and cold. Now, old woodchuck, go back into your hole. If you see your shadow clear, warmer days cannot be near. Sad old woodchuck, long winter is foretold. Billy Woodchuck had been asleep for a long, long time. The world above was white with snow, but no matter how hard the cold winter winds might blow, or how heavily the snow fell, in their underground chamber, Mrs. Woodchuck's family were snug and warm in their beds. At last, one day, late in the winter, Billy heard someone moving about. He was so drowsy that at first he didn't stir, but finally he opened an eye and saw that it was his mother who had disturbed him. "What is it, Mother? Has spring come?" Billy asked. "No, my child," she answered. "At least I do not know that it has." "Then why are you getting up?" Opening both his eyes, Billy was surprised to see that Mrs. Woodchuck was putting on the warmest clothes she had. "You're not going out of doors, are you?" he inquired. His mother was already drawing on a pair of thick red mittens. "Yes," she said, "this is Groundhog Day, and I must go out and see what the weather is like." "But I thought every day was Groundhog Day for us," Billy replied. "Well, you might say that it is," she agreed. "But this is different. Today is what men call Groundhog Day." "May I come with you?" he asked. By this time he was wide awake. Mrs. Woodchuck looked at him somewhat doubtfully. "Young groundhogs like you aren't supposed to go out this time of year," she said. "It's still quite cold, you know." "Please, Mother." "Well, you must wear plenty of warm clothing," his mother told him. And she gave him so many coats to put on that Billy would not have known himself if he had looked in the surface of the brook. Of course, he couldn't do that anyhow then, for the brook was covered with ice. When Billy was ready, they stole out of the room, leaving the other children sound asleep. "Ooh," said Billy Woodchuck, when they stepped outside at last, "how cold it is!" The sun was shining brightly, for all the air was so chilly, and Billy had a fine time chasing his shadow around the pasture. But he never could quite catch it. Sometimes he thought he was going to, though, but whenever he made a pounce at it, his shadow moved just as quickly, and then he had to begin all over again. "We'd better go in," Mrs. Woodchuck said at last, and she looked down rather sadly at her own shadow, as if something had disappointed her. "Oh, no," Billy pleaded. "Let's stay out a while longer." "It's too cold," his mother answered. "But just look at the sun. It's as bright as can be, and I'm not a bit sleepy. Besides, I think spring will come now, maybe tomorrow." But Mrs. Woodchuck knew better. "There'll be 40 more days of winter," she said. "How do you know that?" he asked. "It's the rule," she explained. "If we had not seen our shadows, that would mean that spring was here, and I would wake up your brothers and sisters. But there are our shadows, as plain as can be, so we must go to bed again and sleep 40 days longer." "That's a silly rule," said Billy Woodchuck. "Who made it?" "Don't ask so many questions," Mrs. Woodchuck answered. "Do as I tell you. Run in now." And Billy had to obey. He grumbled a little. It seemed very foolish to him. And once more he asked his mother who it was that made such a horrid rule. But Mrs. Woodchuck would not say another word. To tell the truth, she did not know the answer. She only knew that it was so. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Oh, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? On February 2nd, at the morning's break of day, a friendly little woodchuck went gaily on his way. At the first sight of a woodpile, he smacked his hungry lips and chucked the wood logs wildly and waved his hearty hips. Oh, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? He chucked all the wood that a woodchuck could if a woodchuck could chuck wood. He gathered all the wood chips into his woolen bag, and the friendly little woodchuck's stubby tail began to wag. Returning toward his home ground, he proudly marched his feet, and when he reached his front yard, he stacked the wood so neat. Oh, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? He chucked all the wood that a woodchuck could if a woodchuck could chuck wood. Oh, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? He chucked all the wood that a woodchuck could if a woodchuck could chuck wood. He chucked all the wood that a woodchuck could if a woodchuck could chuck wood.